should all be proud of Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson
No.
and her historic investiture to the United States Supreme Court. More than 100 justices have served on the United States Supreme Court over the past 200 years. But today, for the first time, Americans and people across the world will see 4 women sitting on the bench. And today, for the first time, Americans will see a Black woman serving on our nation's highest court. This is a proud day for America, for our democracy, and in particular for women and Black women. This fulfills major promises President Biden made to help make sure our Supreme Court bench reflects the diversity of our nation, and more broadly, to strengthen the judiciary by fighting to nominate and confirm federal judges at a fast rate. He promised his nominees would be experienced, committed to the rule of law, and that they would represent diverse personal and professional backgrounds. Since taking office, President Biden has made 140
deposited by Albania.
Which one would you rather watch?
States of America.
The UN or the White House press secretary?
The
One
Council
for
is
UN,
now
2 for White House press secretary.
ready to proceed to a vote on this draft resolution, of which it is seized. I now give the floor to members of the Council who wish to make a statement before the vote. I give the floor
What are they voting on
to
right now?
the representative of the United States.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yesterday, the Secretary General said, and I quote, "The
What are they voting
UN
on?
Charter is clear. Any annexation of a state or territory by another state resulting from the threat or use of force is a violation of the principles of the UN Charter and international law," unquote. That very violation is what we are confronted with today. The United States has proposed a resolution with Albania to condemn the illegal so-called referenda
To condemn it?
held in Ukrainian territory. The resolution is straightforward. It condemns these illegal referenda. It calls on all states to not recognize any altered state of Ukraine. And it requires that Russia withdraw its troops from Ukraine immediately.
Or what? I
We've
don't know
heard
what they're
from
going to
many
do.
of you over the course of the past few days that you felt the process was rushed. Let me be clear. What was rushed was the Russian illegal act to annex Ukrainian territory. As a council, we had to respond. Colleagues, this is exactly what the Security Council was made to do. Defend
Or we
sovereignty,
go to war. Is that what this means?
protect territorial integrity, promote peace and security. The United Nations was built on an idea
Rolling up my
that
sleeve.
never again would one country be allowed to take another's territory by force. That path, we agreed, leads to history's most horrific outcomes. Russia's attempted annexations are, without a shadow of doubt, exactly that. We're talking about a UN member state, a Security Council member, attempting to annex part of another through force. The outcomes of these sham referenda were predetermined in Moscow, and everybody knows it. They were held behind the barrel of Russian guns. Time and time again, we have seen the Ukrainian people fight for their country and their democracy. The Ukrainian civilian who removed a Russian landmine with his bare hands. The Ukrainians abroad who returned to fight for their country. The soldiers sacrificing their lives to stop Russian advances. Putin miscalculated the resolve of the Ukrainians. The Ukrainian people have demonstrated loud and clear they will never accept being subjugated to Russian rule. And so the United States will never recognize any territory Russia attempts to seize or allegedly annex as anything other than part of Ukraine. Secretary General Guterres has said the same. He said yesterday, again, and I quote, Any decision to proceed with the annexation of Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson, and Zaporizhia regions of Ukraine would have no legal value and deserves to be condemned. Let me repeat that. Deserves to be condemned. The Secretary General then said it went against, and I quote again, the purposes and principles of United Nations. It is a dangerous escalation. In his words, it has no place in the modern world. It has no place in the modern world. Colleagues, we all have an interest in defending the sacred principles of sovereignty and
countries.
Defending
We'll
peace
come back to that.
in our modern world. All of us understand the implications for our own borders, our own economies, and our own countries if these principles are tossed aside. This is also bigger than any one nation, large or small. It's about our collective security, our collective responsibility to maintain international peace and security, not just for ourselves, but for the world. This is what this body is here to do. We are the first line of defense for the UN Charter, and we must demonstrate that we take that defense seriously. We must show that the Council can work despite the actions of one permanent member. This is not a moment to stand on the sidelines. This is a moment to stand up for the UN Charter, for its values, for its principles, and for its purposes. And if Russia chooses to shield itself from accountability, then we will take further steps in the General Assembly to send an unmistakable message to Moscow that the world is still on the side of defending sovereignty and protecting territorial integrity. Earlier today, we saw Putin celebrate this clear violation of international law. He threw a party on Red Square to pat himself on the back for these illegal referenda. He's gloating and reminiscing about the Soviet Empire and stated that this was just the beginning. As we all sit in this chamber and solemnly consider this resolution, Putin is instead boastfully shoving our shared values in our faces. It's time we stand up to defend our collective beliefs together. In defense of these principles that we hold dear, the United States is putting forward this resolution with Albania. In defense of all countries to have the right to be safe from invasion and annexation, we are voting yes. And in defense of the world's collective peace and security, we urge you to vote yes too. Let us show Putin the resolve of this council. Thank you, Mr. President.
Merci.
I thank the representative of the United States for her statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of the United Kingdom.
So I guess what they're going to do is they're going to condemn Putin's actions, and then nothing is going to come of it, as they've been doing now for several weeks, actually several months, since February when he invaded Ukraine. I want to give a big shout out to someone. All right. Eric First, the telemarketer who never quits. Please stop calling me. And also Sean Collins. Believe that's Stuart Collins. Sorry. Yeah, I know you use a prepaid phone because you sent me an email from your prepaid phone email. Dude, you really got to go back to school and learn how to type a message. You wrote a 7-sentence, all in one sentence, all lowercase, calling me a commie and stuff. Like, listen, we love hate mail. I can't even, put that back out because your spelling was so atrocious. Like, learn how to spell just a little bit. If you're going to try to insult someone, like, seriously, that was pretty weak. Anyway, let's listen to the UK.
Russia's actions and vote in favor of this resolution. Thank you.
They vote in favor of the resolution.
Je remercie.
I'll
thank
paraphrase for you.
The representative of the United Kingdom for that statement. And I now give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
The representative
Господин
of the
председатель,
Russian
Mr. President.
Federation. Here we go. Let's listen.
We are forced to note that some of our colleagues in the Council have reached a new low. Even the few vestiges of decorum that it seemed to us still remained in this hall have been violated. We do not know of any other examples where the Security Council would have ever adopted resolutions that directly condemn one of the members of the Council. Tell me, do you seriously expect Russia to consider and support such a draft?
Oh, yeah, they have veto
And if
power.
not, then it turns out that you are intentionally pushing us to use the right of the veto in order to then wax lyrical about the fact that Russia abuses this right.
I forgot they have veto power.
Such openly hostile actions on the part of the West are a refusal to engage and cooperate within the Council, a refusal of practices and experience gained over many years. This is nothing more than a low-grade provocation with a goal that is clear to all.
Provocation.
Mr. President, on September 27, we already spoke in detail of the reasons and the purposes for carrying out referendums in the Donetsk and Luhansk republics, as well as the Kherson and Zaporizhia regions. On September 28th, the final votes were tallied. The overwhelming majority of those who voted, 99% in the DNR, 98% in the LNR, 93% in Zaporizhia, and 7% in the Kherson region supported the integration of these regions into Russia. Despite the challenging security situation and the provocations of the Kiev regime, the overwhelming majority of voters decided to vote in favor, ranging from 76% in the Kherson region to 97% in the Donetsk People's Republic. The results of the referendum speak for themselves. The residents of these regions do not want to return to Ukraine. They have made an informed and free choice in favor of our country. The referendums were carried out in full conformity with the norms and principles of international law, no matter how our Western opponents may try, or even the Secretary General may try to prove otherwise. The Secretary General, who suddenly, without having a mandate to do so, decided to speak on behalf of the entire United Nations. More than 100 international observers from Italy, Germany, Venezuela, and Latvia who observed the referendum also recognized its outcome as legitimate. Washington, which today is the loudest to criticize us and to speak of the territorial integrity of Ukraine, recently declared that they were willing to use force to protect Taiwan, which is an integral part of the People's Republic of China. This is just another glaring example of double standards. Today, treaties were signed on the accession of these new regions into the Russian Federation after their endorsement by the Russian parliament and the signing of the presidential decrees. The will of the residents of Donbass, Zaporizhia, and Kherson to reunite with Russia will be realized. There will be no turning back, as today's draft resolution would try to impose. The regime in Kiev, which has put the interests of its Western sponsors above the interests of its own people, pushed these regions away from itself, and it is to blame for this outcome. The Maidan authorities seem not to have drawn any conclusions so far. Today, we are witnessing yet another atrocity carried out by the Kiev regime. The Ukrainian Nazis have fired on a column of people who were waiting for permits to enter territory under our control in Zaporizhia, and there are dozens of deaths. I want to note that the Council did have the opportunity to adopt a truly balanced and useful document. We constructively proposed amendments that many of those present here today would have supported. Amendments on the fact that it is necessary to respect both the territorial integrity of all member states and the principle of the self-determination of peoples in accordance with the Charter and the Declaration on the Principles of International Law of 1970. About the fact that pursuant to OSCE documents, which all Western states signed, by the way, the security of states is indivisible, and no one must strengthen their own security at the expense of the security of others. We propose noting the objective fact that members of the Council have different assessments of the outcome of the referendums. And who can argue with the fact that the free expressions of the will of the people is an essential element of a democratic society? Perhaps those for whom, in the case of Kosovo, no referendum was necessary. Finally, we propose reflecting the Council's call to all parties to intensify the search for a diplomatic solution to the conflict. Shouldn't this be the goal of our joint efforts? It seems that our former Western partners have once again demonstrated that in reality they do not want peace in Ukraine. They dream of Russia's defeat, and in light of the rabid animosity of the West, puts other goals before us. The logic of the authors of this document becomes clear if we look at the non-transparent method that they have chosen to negotiate it through bilateral consultations when certain members of the Council were unable to see what other members, what their colleagues were thinking and proposing. We are all well aware of the goal of this draft and its fate. Its authors are prepared to devalue the efforts of the Council as the principal organ for the maintenance of peace and security and brazenly use this forum as a dress rehearsal before their main performance in the General Assembly. There, the West is going to use their familiar scheme to mobilize resources, exert pressure, and twist the arms of all member states that they can reach. Some will falter, but we hope that many will be able to withstand this pressure. Those who are prepared to hold and protect their own opinion, those who are prepared to pursue an independent policy and uphold the principle of the sovereign equality of states in actions, those who oppose the hegemony of one state and its satellites, who do not see other states as equal partners. We hope that the members of the UN will be able to form their own unbiased view of this emerging situation and make the right choice. Thank you very much for your opinion.
Je remercie le représentant.
Thank you to the representative of the Russian Federation for that statement. I will now put the draft resolution to the vote. Those in favor of draft resolution S/2022/720, please raise your hand.
Que ceux qui sont abstention ou non,
Microphone for those against the draft resolution, please raise your hands. Abstentions, please raise your hands.
les résultats.
The results of the vote are as follows. The draft resolution 10 for, 1 against, and 4 abstentions. The draft resolution has not been adopted owing to the negative vote of a permanent member of the Council. I now give the floor to members of the Council who wish to make a statement after the vote. I now give the floor to Albania.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Another dark day for the Security Council, for the United Nations, and for the world. The Security Council was again taken hostage on the same issue and by the same country, and was prevented from acting on one of the most important issues on its agenda. Once more, Russia misused a unique privilege that the UN Charter, the very one that Russia, with its actions, is shredding to pieces, has granted to permanent members to maintain peace and security and uphold the international law, and not to block the Council when the world needs it. The text proposed today was about the most fundamental issues and principles that bound us together in the United Nations, in the multilateral world, the preservation of territorial integrity, the sovereignty and independence of a UN member state. As it has done since 24th of February, Russia chose to stand in total opposition with international law, with its own commitments, with all the repeated calls from every corner of the world to stop its actions, change course, and work for peace. Today's vote showed once more that Russia is and remains isolated in its actions and with its positions. Today's vote showed that Russia never wanted peace, never wanted dialogue. What it wanted was only a part of the territory of Ukraine, which now claims that it's its own, will not accept it and will not recognize any of the consequences of the Russia's actions that go to the detriment of Ukraine. Colleagues, what is happening now in Ukraine should be an alarming bell for the entire world. We should not accept illegal annexation of the territory of other countries. We reiterate the call on all states and international organizations not to recognize any acquisition by the Russian Federation of any part of the territory of Ukraine, and to refrain from any action or dealing that might be interpreted as recognizing any such acquisition. We must be united and firmly condemn this unacceptable behavior and stand in defense of and support Ukraine, because in this way we defend the rules-based international order, international law, and the UN Charter. We'll continue our fight in the GA and we'll call on the General Assembly to defend the UN Charter. And as to the referred Russian mantra, to draw artificial parallels with other situations which have nothing to do with Russia's aggression, we have been clear about it more than once, and we are not going to dignify such claims which are of the same nature as there is no war in Ukraine, we have committed no crimes there, and we do not want its territory. We trust everyone is today more than ever eyes wide open, and I thank you.
Je remercie.
I thank the representative of Albania for that statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of India.
Thank you, Mr. President. India is deeply disturbed by the recent turn of developments in Ukraine. We've always advocated that no solution can ever be arrived at the cost of human lives. We urge that all efforts are made by concerned sides for the immediate cessation of violence and hostilities. Dialogue is the only answer to settling differences and disputes, however daunting that may appear at this moment. The path to peace requires us to keep all channels of diplomacy open. India's Prime Minister has unequivocally conveyed this in his discussions with world leaders, including with the presidents of the Russian Federation and Ukraine. So has our External Affairs Minister in his recent engagements at the General Assembly last week. India's Prime Minister has also emphasized that this cannot be an era of war. We therefore sincerely hope for an early resumption of peace talks to bring about an immediate ceasefire and resolution of the conflict. India's position has been clear and consistent from the very beginning of this conflict. The global order is anchored on the principles of the UN Charter, international law, and respect for sovereignty and the territorial integrity of all states. Escalation of rhetoric or tension is in no one's interest. It is important that pathways are found for a return to the negotiating table. Keeping in view the totality of the evolving situation, India decided to abstain on the resolution. Thank you.
Je remercie.
I thank the representative of India for her statement, and I give the floor to the representative of Norway.
President, we voted in favor of this resolution. The Security Council has a responsibility to act to prevent and end acts of aggression atrocities, and certainly breaches of territorial integrity. We deeply regret that this resolution failed to be adopted due to a single member casting its veto. It is wrong that Russia, an invading force, can also prevent Council action aimed at ending its aggression. Moscow has launched an illegal process of annexation of the Ukrainian regions of Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson, and Zaporizhzhia. The Secretary General was very clear yesterday, affirming that any annexation of a state's territory by another state resulting from the threat or use of force is a violation of the principles of the UN Charter and international law. We fully concur. Whatever outcome Russia announces in Moscow today is contrary to international law, has no legal effect, and in no way changes Ukraine's sovereignty within its internationally recognized borders. The Russian Federation, one of the 5 permanent members of the Security Council, has a clear responsibility to respect the Charter, yet its action related to Ukraine cuts against everything UN membership is supposed to stand for. With this action, Russia is isolating themselves from the global community, rejecting multilateralism, international law, and the principles and purposes of the UN Charter. They also continue to ignore the global effects they are causing. President, it is unacceptable that the Security Council has again been blocked from taking action on this significant threat to international peace and security. We are, however, assured that the General Assembly now will have the opportunity to take up this grave and important issue, and we urge the speedy production of a special report on this use of the veto. President, the position of Norway is clear. We are fully committed to the sovereignty, unity, independence, and territorial integrity of Ukraine within its internationally recognized borders. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Norway for that statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of China.
谢谢主席先生。主席先生，中方对刚刚付诸表决的决议草案投了弃权票。我愿就中方的投票立场做如下说明。
Sorry, Mr. President, China abstained from voting on the draft resolution just put to vote. I would like to make the following statement in relation to China's vote. Let me start again. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, China abstained from voting on the draft resolution just put to vote. I would like to make the following statement in relation to China's vote. First, China's position on the issue of Ukraine is consistent and clear. The sovereignty and territorial integrity of all countries should be safeguarded. The purposes and principles of the UN Charter should be observed. Legitimate security concerns of all parties should be taken seriously. All efforts conducive to the peaceful resolution of the crisis should be supported. Second, over 7 months into the Ukraine crisis, the crisis and its spillover effects have had a wide range of negative impacts. The prospect of a prolonged and expanded crisis is also worrying. We believe China is deeply concerned about this prospect. We believe that the pressing priority is to make every effort to de-escalate the situation and guide the parties to restart diplomatic negotiations as soon as possible to open the door to a political settlement with legitimate concerns brought into the negotiations and viable options on the table in the effort to achieve an early ceasefire. Third, the Security Council as the core of the international collective security mechanism, should uphold objectivity and impartiality, and give priority to using the good offices and the mediation tools conferred by the UN Charter to play a responsible and constructive role in the political settlement of the Ukraine issue. Any action taken by the Security Council should be truly conducive to easing the situation and resolving the crisis rather than intensifying conflicts and exacerbating confrontation. Fourth, the current crisis in Ukraine is a result of the accumulation and interplay of various conflicts and tensions over a long period of time. Facts have shown that political isolation, sanctions, and pressurization, fueling the tensions, and bloc confrontation will not bring peace. Instead, they will only worsen the situation and make the issue more complicated and intractable. China calls on all parties concerned to exercise restraint, refrain from actions that exacerbate tensions, and leave space for a solution through diplomatic negotiations. As a responsible country, China has always stood on the side of peace. We will continue to play a constructive role in easing the situation and resolving the crisis. Thank you, Mr. President.
Je remercie.
I thank the representative of China for that statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, President. President, yet again, Russia has abused its veto to defend its illegal actions. Council members have voted in different ways, but one thing is clear. Not a single other member of this council recognises Russia's attempted illegal annexation of Ukrainian territory. Russia's veto doesn't change that fact. The announcement by President Putin today of the accession of the Ukrainian regions of Kherson, Zaporizhia, Luhansk, and Donetsk into the Russian Federation has no legal effect. It is fantasy. Russia's invasion needs to end. The world has made this clear for 7 months. Yet Russia's response has been further escalation, further mobilization, nuclear threats, and today, another callous attack on a civilian convoy in Zaporizhia. The sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine is under attack. The international system is being assaulted in front of our eyes. Russia will not succeed in this illegal imperialist war. The only question is how much damage they do, how many lives they waste before they realize that. Thank you, President.
Je remercie.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom for that statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Ireland.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ireland voted in favour of this resolution. We did so because we believe there must be a robust response from the Security Council to yet another blatant breach of the UN Charter by the Russian Federation in its war of aggression against Ukraine. Ireland remains fully committed to the sovereignty and the territorial integrity of Ukraine within its internationally recognised borders. Earlier this week, Ireland condemned the sham referenda conducted in occupied Ukrainian territory by Russia or its proxies. Today, we categorically reject the so-called results of those illegal and illegitimate referenda and announcements purporting to annex Ukrainian territory. They have no legal effect. As I said at our meeting on Tuesday, this is nothing more than a blatant land grab by the Russian Federation. Let me be clear. Ukraine's borders have not changed. The sham referenda did not reflect the popular or freely expressed will of the Ukrainian people. They are illegal, they violate the UN Charter, they violate Russia's obligations under international law, and they violate the law of occupation. President, once again, the Russian Federation has shamefully used a veto in a flagrant attempt to excuse its own military aggression against Ukraine, a fellow member of our United Nations. The shocking images of civilians killed or injured near Zaporizhzhia this morning are a stark reminder that it is civilians who are paying the highest price for Russia's senseless war. The use of this anachronistic veto in these terrible and tragic circumstances is simply reprehensible and undermines the legitimacy of this Council in the eyes of the watching world. However, this veto will not prevent the international community from responding to Russia's blatant breaches of international law. This veto will not deter us from holding Russia accountable for its actions. In accordance with Resolution 76262, Ireland now calls on the Council to submit a special report on the use of the veto in this instance to the General Assembly. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Ireland for that statement. And I now give the floor to the representative of Ghana.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ghana voted in support of the draft resolution, as we firmly believe in its objective to uphold the rules of international.
All right, so you guys are a little bit curious as to what the fuck is going on here. Let me explain something, all right? Let me explain what happened. So the United States, in conjunction with Albania, right? So they submitted a draft resolution condemning Russia for what they're doing. And this resolution for invading Ukraine and annexing, the districts that Russia says are theirs and Ukraine says they're theirs, but the citizens there say they're Russia, whatever. All right, so the United States, in all its mighty wisdom, decided that it was going to introduce a resolution, although they do know that Russia is a permanent member of the UN Security Council, therefore has the ultimate veto power. If they disagree with anything, they are able to veto it. So they did this as purely a symbolism, right? So they introduced this resolution, which obviously was going to fail because Russia has veto power, in an effort to then draft something, send it to the General Assembly, which is all the United Nations, each individual person, not this little group of people, where then they'll vote, I guess, to attempt to take Russia off of to remove them from being able to do this veto power, right? So just as many people are saying in the chat, this seems to be a little bit more of a provocation, right? The United States is kind of saying, hold my Michelob Ultra. And, they're not giving the whole Budweiser yet, right? They're just saying like Michelob Ultra is a Canadian beer, right? What's a really shitty beer from the United States? And if you say PBR, I'm kicking you out of the chat. What's a shitty beer from the United States, right? I wear flannel. The only thing I drink is IPAs now. Anyway, but what's a really shitty beer here in the United States? I like Budweiser, and that's not a shitty beer, and I love PBR. I used to want to get it tattooed. I wanted, still may, 16-ouncer right on my bicep. But Coors Light, there we go. Let's go Coors Light, all right? Sorry, the person in my family that drinks it. So Coors Light. So he's like, hold my Coors Light. He hasn't got up to like the high level beer yet. His statement today. How many of you guys heard this? Watch. You want to hear something funny? Wait. So let me turn down Mexico. Yeah, like Mexico's going to say anything about anyone else invading it. Oh, let's listen to this.
Annexation.
Mexico's going to talk about invading other people's countries' borders.
Foreign invasion.
Get the fuck out of here.
Can, under no circumstances, consent to another country also being a victim of this type of act of aggression.
What?
The position of Mexico has been clear.
Send them to America.
With regard to unwavering respect of international law, specifically the prohibition on territorial expansion by way of the use of force or other mechanisms in breach of the United Nations Charter. According to the rules of international law set forth explicitly in our organization's charter and referenced both by the General Assembly and referendum and the Security Council and in the International Court of Justice's jurisprudence, according to that, the referenda held in the occupied territory of Ukraine within the conflict.
All right, so like I was saying before, the guy from Mexico proceeded to lie about nothing. How many of you guys heard this today? Joe Biden made a statement. I'm not even going to put the video. I'm just going to play it.
I want to say this again. America is fully prepared with our NATO allies to defend every single inch of NATO territory. Every single inch. So, Mr. Putin, don't misunderstand what I'm saying. Every inch.
It would have been funny if he said, Mr. Putin, don't misunderstand what I'm saying, because I don't know what I'm saying. Every inch. Why not yardstick? Kamala. Or something like that, right? But he won't. So this is kind of setting up, like, I don't know. I believe the UN Charter said that someone cannot be a UN member if they are currently in a internal conflict, right? Civil war. And even before Russia went in and took back Donetsk and Luhansk and all that stuff, even before that occurred, guess what happened, right? Ukraine was in a civil war with this Western Ukraine, Eastern Ukraine. These areas where they pulled everything back. So they wouldn't have been eligible to become a member anyway because they have internal intra-state, right? Yeah, problems going on between their own regions, as effectively a civil war. They've been killing each other for years, okay? They've been killing each other for years. So as little children say when they tell a big story, the only way that Ukraine is going to become a NATO ally, which is weird because we just heard Ireland call them an ally. They're not an ally. Well, maybe you could consider them an ally because we fund them like crazy, right? Is that why they're an ally? Because they're getting all our money? Here's a serious question. Maybe April can dig it up. How much money has Brazil or Albania or Mexico or the UK or France or Ireland? How much money and resources have they given the Ukrainian military? I bet we know. I bet the answer is nothing. That would be my guess. Because remember this guy named Trump that always said that the UN was kind of a sham because nobody else really pays into it, and he wanted everyone to pay into it? Remember that? And everyone's like, oh, you're trying to like ruin the country and our reputation with our allies. And now we're back to effectively funding another country's war against one of the superpowers of the country. Because why? I don't know. You know, I'm not apologizing for what Russia is doing. I don't think we should be in the middle of it because, well, frankly, it doesn't concern us. You know what concerns us? The fact that we have homeless veterans sleeping on the street. You know what concerns us? The fact that last year, 108,000 people died of fentanyl overdoses. You know what concerns us? The fact that over 2 million people so far year to date have already crossed the southern border, entering the United States illegally. That means 2 million people committed crimes to get into the United States. You know what should concern us? The fact that you don't have a good likelihood of walking down a city street without getting robbed, shot, raped, or murdered. Like, those are things that you would think would be really relevant. Like, we'd be holding these UN press council, meetings talking about how in New York City an EMT was just stabbed to death in broad daylight, and nobody's even talking about it today because we're talking about a hurricane, because that makes more sense than to talk about the overwhelming amount of crime that goes through this country. But no, all you apologists that believe we should send all of our taxpayer dollars to a different country instead, which is really weird because you guys are the ones that believe in social welfare and just paying people, free college, free Medicaid, free blah, 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 frothing at the mouth. That's what you believe, right? That's why everyone is like, oh, send all the money to Ukraine because that makes a whole lot of fucking sense, right? Send the money to a country that has no viable supplies that are going to give back to us. Are we loaning them the money? Like, that would be curious. Are we loaning the money? Can I be the loan shark that has to go break the legs when they don't pay us back because we're not going to get paid back? Everybody knows we're not going to get paid back, but I would love to get paid back. I would love to get the $27,000 in taxes that I had to write a check for to the IRS last year. Or the $7,000 to the state of Virginia that I have to fucking pay for some fucking reason because of personal taxes. I would love to be able to get any of that money back, but no, I can't. You know why? Because that money is being allocated to other countries, not because it's being allocated to care for Americans. Even though, you know, this whole thing, everyone shits on America First candidates and America First people and MAGAs and all this stuff because they believe in helping us here in the United States, right? But we're just blindly sending money to a foreign country. So when I talk about the facts of, you know, it doesn't make sense that we're sending money to Ukraine, I'm speaking based on, well, it doesn't make sense that we're sending money to Ukraine for a variety of reasons. One, 2019, we had a congressional law against sending money to Ukraine, specifically the Azov Battalion, which are the ones that are fighting on the front line in eastern Ukraine. But let's not, or Western Ukraine, wherever the fuck it is, but let's pretend like that doesn't exist because that's what mainstream media does. There's no Nazis in Ukraine. Mind you, that video that I shared out on social media the other day of a Ukrainian grocery store turning away Hasidic Jews, that didn't exist. It was made up. It didn't happen. It was actually in Brooklyn. No, it wasn't. It didn't happen because Brooklyn doesn't have any crime or any racism whatsoever. The only people that are allowed to be racist now are people that are just white and have beards and wear American, Make America Great Again hats. Those are the only people that are allowed to be racist. Fuck this shit. Excuse my language. How do I turn the sound back?
Incorporation of 4 regions into the Russian Federation are serious developments in this conflict. They make finding a peaceful resolution more difficult, and they implicate the territorial integrity, sovereignty, and independence of a UN member state. These are core principles of the United Nations Charter, central to the peaceful, cooperative, and productive relations between states, and essential for the security and stability of all. These principles protect all states, large and small, powerful and weak, and this has informed our vote today. The principle of self-determination is also a fundamental principle enshrined in the Charter we all ratified. But any tensions between this principle and the principles of territorial integrity, sovereignty, and independence need not amount to a zero-sum game. The developments of the last days warrant a clear statement from the Council underlining the importance of the fundamental principles of the Charter. We have voted in favour of the resolution for that reason, although we would have also liked more time to engage in further edits to the text and on the substance. But as we have continuously stressed in this chamber, the pathway towards a peaceful resolution of this conflict lies in solutions that involve both sides coming to the table quickly, without preconditions, and with the support of trusted interlocutors. We urge both Russia and Ukraine to do so, and I know many around this table today and outside share in this view. This war has gone on too long and destroyed too many lives. Resolving this conflict is important not only for Ukraine and Russia and both their peoples, but also for global peace and security. We need to all stop escalation and help create the conditions for peace. We stand ready to work with all members of this Council to find ways to effectively address the root causes of this conflict and to support a diplomatic pathway forward. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the United Arab Emirates for that statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Gabon. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, Gabon abstained from the vote on the resolution put to the Security Council. My country's position is clear. We are against the war, and we are for a diplomatic solution to the war. Since the beginning of this crisis, we have hammered home in this room and in the Council the idea that we are for the respect of principles of the Charter, and we have continued to call every time for the cessation of hostilities and negotiations in good faith between the parties. We continue and will continue to call for dialogue and good faith negotiations between the parties to put an end to the war and to promote peaceful coexistence between the parties. Because we want to stand on the side of a solution to the crisis, we would reiterate our support to all initiatives geared to a diplomatic solution to the crisis. Thank you. Thank you, says the President of the Security Council, to the representative of Gabon for that statement. I will now make a statement in my capacity of representative of France. France, with the greatest firmness, condemns the illegal annexation of the regions of Ukraine of Donetsk, Kherson, Luhansk, and Zaporizhzhia to the Russian Federation. That's why it voted in favor of the resolution that was proposed. France calls upon all countries attached to the respect of international law to join us in this condemnation. This region, like Crimea, is an integral part of Ukraine in its internationally recognized borders. France will never recognize these illegal annexations, nor the results of fake referenda that preceded them. It's a flagrant violation of sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine, as well as of the United Nations Charter. The Secretary General said it. All decisions to proceed to annex this territory has no legal validity and should be condemned. France takes this opportunity of mobilizing all members of the Council who voted in favor of this resolution, who expressed their attachment to international law and the defense of the United Nations Charter. France applauds the opening and the spirit of compromise reflected in the co-authors of the resolution's approach. France condemns the veto put forth by the Russian Federation, which once again shows its irresponsibility in carrying out its duties as a permanent member of the Security Council. And today, this is without appeal. Russia stands alone more than ever. We regret that this Council was not able to take a unanimous stance to defend the principles of sovereignty and territorial integrity, which are, after all, the very pillars of international law. Ukraine is fighting for its legitimate defense, and as the President of the Republic, Emmanuel Macron, said very clearly, France will continue to stand alongside Ukraine and support it to face the Russian aggression and to allow it to recover its full sovereignty over all of its territory as a whole. I resume my function as President of the Council, and I now give the floor to the representative of Ukraine.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Distinguished members of the Security Council, and I also recognize here the representative of Russia in the permanent seat of the Soviet Union. His lonely hand just raised against the draft resolution has again testified to Russia's isolation and its desperate attempts to deny reality and our common commitments starting from the UN Charter. Putin's envoy has followed in the footsteps of his master in Moscow, where a puppet show has been organized today in an attempt to deny the obvious, that the aggressive and adventurous regime in Russia is heading to its imminent defeat. I'm now going to elaborate on lies that have nothing in common with reality, because the reality is quite different. In reality, Putin has tried to grab territories he does not even physically control on the ground. In reality, Ukrainian forces continue their operations to liberate our sovereign territories. In reality, at least 30 civilians have been killed and 88 wounded following the Russian shelling of Zaporizhzhia earlier today. Russia persists in its genocidal practices of killing Ukrainians, torturing and oppressing them in the occupied territories. Therefore, the only way to make all Ukrainians throughout the sovereign territory of Ukraine feel safe and under the protection of their state is to hoist Ukrainian flags back throughout occupied Donbass, southern Ukraine, and Crimea. Ukraine has every right to liberate its territories and people and will continue to do this regardless of Russia's words or deeds. Sham referendums are elements of aggression against a sovereign state, and anyone involved in organizing or conducting this farce will be held accountable. Dear colleagues, the resolution has not been adopted just because of one negative vote, the vote of Russia. We are tired of repeating it again and again. Allowing Russia to avail itself of the right of the Soviet Union to veto decisions of the Security Council effectively prevents this body from exercising its primary responsibility under the UN Charter, maintenance of international peace and security. At this very moment, millions of people around the world see on their screens the devastating impact of the Russian presence in the Security Council and the Council's failure to effectively respond to a most pressing security threat of a global nature. This failure undermines the image and authority of the United Nations as a whole, which is unjust and unfortunate, because the Security Council is only one pillar of this organization, but a broken one. Luckily, this organization can still rely on the other pillars, which are increasingly demonstrating their determination to step in and use their potential to the maximum amid the situation in the Security Council. I avail of this opportunity to again convey the words of appreciation from my President for the Secretary General's clear position and strong statement that he delivered yesterday. A statement of integrity, a statement of commitment to the UN Charter, a beacon of hope for the UN membership. I quote, "It cannot be reconciled with the international legal framework. It stands against everything the international community is meant to stand for. It flouts the purposes and principles of the United Nations. It is a dangerous escalation. It has no place in the modern world. It must not be accepted," said the Secretary General. End of quote. But let me pose a question here, dear colleagues. What if the Secretary General was not a person of the highest moral standards and was not so dedicated in the cause of defending the Charter? This question is not a rhetorical one. We have seen Secretary Generals of different calibers and backgrounds. We all remember Dag Hammarskjöld, who defended the UN purposes and principles and was never intimidated by Moscow's direct threats to him. Yet, there were Secretary Generals who hesitated too long to act to prevent major crises. Today, many of us called upon the Russian ambassador to respect the UN Charter. But let me ask again, why should the Russian Federation respect the Charter that was not followed when letting it occupy the permanent seat of the Soviet Union? Most of you have already heard on many occasions the Ukrainian position on the illegal occupation by Russia of the Soviet seat in the Security Council. But let me quote to you the Russian confession of bypassing the rules of admission to the membership, posted on the UN official website. And I quote, "In fact, the whole process outwardly looked like a simple change of the country nameplate at the table of delegations in the General Assembly and in the Security Council. Instead of the Soviet Union plate, the Russian Federation appeared." End of quote. Said right in our face the Soviet envoy to UN in 1991, Yuri Vorontsov. Ladies and gentlemen, not a single vote, not a single formal decision, neither in the Security Council nor in the General Assembly. Just a notification by President Yeltsin delivered to the then Secretary General, delivered to the addressee by the Soviet ambassador Vorontsov as an ambassador of a new member state, the Russian Federation. I hope we will never have Secretary Generals of this organization who execute the wishes of Russian presidents and admit new members behind closed doors and without decisions of the Security Council and the General Assembly. What is next, you may ask? Attempts by Russia to manipulate the procedures of the General Assembly to redraw the political map of the world that we may see soon in the coming weeks? We should not tolerate this legal nihilism and the aggressor's presence in the seat of a permanent member any longer. The absence of the necessary treatment has turned Russia into a cancerous tumor in the body of the Security Council. It has to be removed before the entire UN system is metastasized. It is time to act. If this Council is incapable of acting with Russia, it is your duty to act without it. And let me thank all of you who have demonstrated during the vote today your readiness to act as responsible and committed members of the Security Council. I thank Albania, France, Ghana, Ireland, Kenya, Mexico, Norway, United Arab Emirates, United Kingdom, United States. I thank everyone who rejected the Russian negative vote to the benefit of this Security Council, to the benefit of the entire organization, to the benefit of international peace and security. And I thank you.
I thank the representative of Ukraine for that statement. There are no further speakers on the list. The session is now adjourned.
The session is now adjourned because apparently that we just learned a whole hell of a lot. UPS is here. I had to make them come back. He's not going to be happy because he skipped me. All right, here's the White House press conference from a few minutes ago. I'll talk about it in a second.
Pacific Island strategy. He announced over $810 million in additional expanded programs to help these countries combat the climate crisis, provide development assistance, enhance maritime security, and more. And finally, President Biden and all 12 Pacific Island presidents who joined him here at the White House for this summit issued a joint declaration to strengthen our partnership and to chart an affirmative vision for the region. Today, as you all saw just a little bit ago, President Biden issued a strong condemnation of Russia's fraudulent attempt to annex sovereign Ukrainian territory. This act is a flagrant violation of international law, and it has no legitimacy. Unfortunately, it's also not surprising. It's straight out of Putin's playbook of deceit, disinformation, and aggression, and we've been warning about it for months. In fact, I've stood at this podium and warned about it several times, including as recently as last week. Based on our information, every aspect of this process was pre-staged and falsified under orders from the Kremlin. The sham referenda were held at gunpoint. Ukrainian civilians were forced to cast ballots through coercion, intimidation, and in some cases under the watch of armed guards. Saying that it somehow reflects the will of the people is an absurdity. The United States will never recognize these actions. The world will never recognize these actions. And we will stay the course, as the president told you earlier today. We have built, led and maintained an extraordinary and coordinated response with our allies and partners, and that response will continue. As President Biden said, we will not be deterred. So what does that mean specifically in reaction to what has just happened? First, as we saw from the Treasury Department and as the President underscored, we are sending a clear warning from the United States government, supported by all of our G7 partners. We will sanction and impose export controls on any individual, entity, or country that provides political or economic support to these attempts at annexation. We have put in place authorities to enable us to do that rapidly and efficiently. We are also announcing new sanctions today that target additional Russian government officials and leaders, including state.
Yeah. Real quick. You guys know something? So you see over there, next to all the ways you could support our channel, well, we got a sick new hoodie. Have you seen this thing yet? Look. Citizen Stringer News. Fighting fake news with facts. How awesome is that hoodie? Here's the best part. The printer for this is, I'm not printing this. The printer for this is giving us a massive discount. So we're getting the hoodies for pretty cheap. So we can actually make some money. So if you guys want, it's getting cold. You can see I had to don the flannel. It's getting a little chilly, bit nipply out here. Go over to the link that's going to be in the chat here as soon as April does it. Go buy one of these hoodies. They're like 45 to 47, depending on your size. We got them in pink and all sorts of stuff. And it's the best way to support us in what we're doing. And if you like the news, nobody likes the news. But if you like me, buy a hoodie. And if you don't like me, buy a hoodie anyway. Right? Right? Isn't that how it works? I think so. I think that's how it works.
State Duma members who are accomplices in these fraudulent actions, and including the central bank governor. We are also sanctioning Russian and Belarusian military officials, and we have specifically targeted defense procurement networks, including international suppliers supporting Russia's military-industrial complex. Second, we will continue to provide military equipment so that Ukraine can defend its territory and its freedom. Today, President Biden will sign legislation from Congress that contains more than $12 billion in additional funding for Ukraine, and we are grateful for the continued support. There is no stronger, more bipartisan rebuke of what Russia has just done, no more timely rebuke, and no more assertive statement that we can make through resources and not just through words, that we are going to continue to help Ukraine defend its territory and to deoccupy those parts that Russia has occupied. Earlier this week, we announced a significant new billion-dollar arms package, which included 18 new HIMARS for Ukraine as part of our long-term commitment to strengthening Ukraine's armed forces over the years ahead. And we expect to have another announcement of immediate security assistance to announce next week. Next, the United States and the international community have been crystal clear that we will use diplomatic tools at our disposal to fundamentally reject Russia's attempts to take its neighbor's territory by force. Today, the United States is supporting a resolution at the UN Security Council to condemn these sham referenda and to call on Russia immediately to withdraw its forces from Ukraine. If Russia seeks to shield itself at the Security Council, the United Nations will work with partners around the world to take action next week at the UN General Assembly. Leaders around the world have spoken out about what's at stake: the independence of the democratic nation of Ukraine, the principles of sovereignty and territorial integrity, and the very foundation of the United Nations Charter and the modern international order. As the Secretary General of the United Nations said yesterday, quote, "It must not be accepted," and it will not be accepted. To put it simply, the regions of Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson, and Zaporizhia remain Ukrainian territory. Ukraine has every right to continue to defend its sovereignty, which the people of Ukraine are doing bravely and courageously every day with the support of the international community. And the United States, for our part, under President Biden's leadership, will support them at every step along the way for as long as it takes. And with that, I'd be happy to take your questions. Yeah.
Ukraine is seeking accelerated membership in NATO. Is that something that's possible or something you would seriously consider?
The United States has been clear for decades that we support an open door.
All right, here, real quick. I think it's really important just to remind all you guys, just in case you're curious as to who that fella is. His name is Jake Sullivan. Now, you may be curious as to why is that relevant. You may remember this infamous quote from Jake Sullivan back in 2016. This could be the most direct link between Donald Trump and Moscow. Computer scientists have apparently uncovered a covert server linking the Trump organization to a Russian-backed bank. Except that was false, and he lied, and there's no accountability whatsoever, and he's now the spokesperson for the State Department of the United States. These people don't give a fuck about you. Back to your regular programming. Buy a hoodie. Like right there, buy a hoodie. If you like this show and you like fast facts like that, buy a hoodie. Please, please. We need your support. We need it. Support us with hoodies.
War policy for NATO, any decision on NATO membership is between the 30 allies and the countries aspiring to join. Right now, our view is that the best way for us to support Ukraine is through practical on-the-ground support in Ukraine, and that the process in Brussels should be taken up at a different time. Yes.
Thanks, Jake. In his speech this morning, the president called the Nord Stream pipeline attacks quote, a deliberate act of sabotage. And he said now the Russians are pumping out misinformation and lies about it. Should we take that to mean that the U.S. now believes that Russia was likely responsible for this act of sabotage?
Well, first, Russia has done what it frequently does when it is responsible for something, which is make accusations that it was really someone else who did it. We've seen this repeatedly over time. But the president was also clear today that there is more work to do on the investigation before the United States government is prepared to make an attribution in this case. One of the practical reasons for that is that because gas is emanating from these pipelines, the Danish authorities and other authorities in the Baltic Sea can't actually get down to the source of the leak to do forensics on what appears to be an explosion. So we will have to wait until a combination of physical inspection, intelligence gathering, and consultation with our allies to make a definitive determination. But what we can say unequivocally is the suggestions Russia has made about the United States and other countries are flat out false. Russia knows they're false, but of course this is part of their playbook.
But how many countries or entities are even capable of carrying out the kind of attack that we saw with hundreds of kilograms of explosives 250 feet below the surface of the sea?
Not many. And I think this is obviously an act of sabotage that took place, we believe, in the neighborhood of 70 to 80 meters, 230 to 270 feet under the ocean. That takes some degree of sophistication. But I don't want to get ahead of myself in terms of asserting how exactly this happened or who exactly did it until we're standing on solid ground. We will continue to work with our allies and partners to gather all of the facts, and then we will make a determination about where we go from there.
Jake, yes. 2 questions. Putin clearly had nuclear weapons on his mind today when he was giving this speech. He said the West is deceitful, hypocritical. The United States is the only country to have used nuclear weapons. And he said, by the way, they've created a precedent. How worrying is that to you?
I've been clear myself, President Biden has been clear, our administration has been clear that there is a risk, given all of the loose talk and the nuclear saber rattling by Putin, that he would consider this. And we've been equally clear about what the consequences would be. We have communicated that directly to the Russians. We do not presently see indications about the imminent use of nuclear weapons. We are, of course, monitoring that carefully and staying in close consultation with allies and partners. But this is something that we are attuned to, taking very seriously, and communicating directly with Russia about, including the kind of decisive responses the United States would have if they went down that dark road.
Is the risk of that higher now than it was 6 or 7 months ago?
Well, what's interesting is that at various points over the course of this conflict, including right at the outset, Putin has brandished the nuclear card. He's doing it again. So the risk has been there from the start. It's there today. I'm not going to characterize its exact level, only to say that we have been taking this seriously for some time, and we continue to take it seriously now.
Yeah. One broader question before you move on. What lessons from 2014 and from Crimea are you using now? What did you learn from that you're applying here?
Well, there's a number of, just in terms of the tactics of how things unfolded in Crimea, including the fact that you didn't have the kind of sustained military conflict associated with it that you do in these cases. That means you cannot draw the analogy too far. On the other hand, one of the things that we have been clear about from the start of this conflict, and even in the months that preceded it, when I stood at this podium and warned that it was coming, is that we were going to be prepared with clear, swift, and very certain responses. And so when I stand here before you today to talk about sanctions, to talk about new funding, to talk about new transfers of military equipment and diplomatic initiatives that are unfolding the very day that Putin gives his speech, that is all the product of months of planning and coordination with our allies and partners so that we do not allow time to elapse, so that we seize the diplomatic initiative, and so that we communicate very clearly we will not accept this, and we will help equip the Ukrainians to push back aggressively against it, even as we rally the international community to condemn it. That has been our strategy from the start. We have tried to be as clear and transparent about that as possible, warning what was going to come, indicating what we would do, and then following through and doing it. And that's what we're doing today. Yeah.
Jake, would the U.S. actively enter the war if Putin used nukes on Ukraine?
So I have said before that we have had the opportunity to communicate directly to Russia a range of consequences for the use of nuclear weapons and the kinds of actions the United States would take. I have also said before that we are not going to telegraph these things publicly. And so all I can tell you is that the Russians understand where things stand on this issue. We understand where things stand on this issue, and I will leave it at that.
Do we run the risk, though, if we're not moving more firepower to Europe right now, that we would be unprepared for a serious response if he were to take that kind of action tomorrow?
President Biden, even before this conflict began, moved a substantial number of additional U.S. forces on land, sea, and air to Europe. After the conflict got underway, within 72 hours, he had ordered the movement of even more forces beyond that. So we are standing at a level of enhanced force posture across the eastern flank, in the major maritime domains, and with all of the capabilities we need in the air as well. We feel that we have in place right now the capacity to effectively deter and respond to any contingency and to make good on what President Biden emphatically reinforced today, that we will defend every inch of NATO territory. The United States has put in place the pieces for that. And if you look at what our NATO allies have done in terms of surging their own capabilities to Eastern Flank allies, upping their own defense expenditures, we are at a level, a state of readiness to take on any contingency, and we're doing the active coordination and scenario planning to be prepared for whatever comes our way.
Is there anything we can do to protect energy infrastructure?
So, okay, well, I have to interject. How long do you think it's going to be before we go to straight up war with Russia? Because before today, I'd be like, no, maybe we got a little bit of time. But I no longer really think we have a little bit of time, because that statement sounded like, well, like, try us, Russia. You know, that's what it sounded like he was saying. And I make no mistake, I don't want to go to war with Russia at all. I don't want the United States to go to war with Russia at all. They need to stop doing this. Like, fucking, like, I know this administration's not very good at thinking about Americans. Right? We know that. They're not very good at it. It's not their strong suit. That's why they've sent $100 billion worth of aid to a foreign country while we're going through our own crisis. What the Dow close at today? Should I look it up real quick for you guys? Let's see. Let's see what the Dow. Oh, down 500 fucking points. 500 points down today. So this week, now we're at 28. We crested under 29,000. Hey, all of you Democrats that are really stoked, right, about all this support we're showing Ukraine, how's your 401k doing, right? Who do you think pays for this? You may, and I get what the objective is, right? Because a lot of conservatives say, hey, guess what? We're going to have to pay for that. Our taxes are going to have to pay for that. Our kids' taxes are going to have to pay for it. I know many of you guys don't believe in children and don't believe in birthing children, right? But just think about other people's children. Oh, wait, that's right. You hate children, too. You believe they're unicorns and not children. Oh, I fucking hate this place. And when I say this place, I mean the society we're living in now. It is so batshit crazy. It's unbelievable, really, when you think about it. If you actually try to use some cognitive thinking, you're just going to be like, stop, you know, because you can't, because they're all nuts. Everybody's nuts. They're all nuts. And they want war. Make no mistake. They want war. They've been trying for war for a long time. Here's something else that you didn't know that I forgot until I just looked at the date. And then I realized today is September 30th. You know what that means? Do you know what that means? We're giving away a trip to Florida. Now, I didn't pay attention the time, Key West, Florida. We're still doing it, but it's whatever. All you have to do is make a qualifying purchase or send a postcard, but you only have, a day left to send a postcard. Any purchase in puretruthcoffee.com, any purchase, including the hoodie. If you buy anything from Pure Truth Coffee, matter of fact, I'll tell you what, because we need people to go and buy this hoodie right now. We need people to use code coffee. You get 10% off your whole order. And if you buy this hoodie, that's 4 entries. 4 entries into our giveaway, which we'll do on Monday night. One of you guys on Monday night will win a trip for 2 to Key West, Florida. And what I'm going to do is basically I'm going to take an average of what the Airbnbs for Key West cost, and then an average of what the national flights cost, which is going to be entirely too much. And then I'm going to give you gift certificates to both. So you don't need to actually go to Key West, Florida, because you'll have a gift certificate for Airbnb, even though they're woke, fuck it. But to use wherever you want. And then you'll have like a flight coupon that you can use, that for wherever you want. But all you got to do right there is go over there. Buy a hoodie, you get 4 entries. Buy anything from the store and you get 1 entry. How about that? I mean, it's pretty awesome. Tell you what I'll do, just to sweeten the pot a little bit, because we need to make money, okay? We need to make some serious money over this weekend. Tell you what I'll do. You ready? I'll give 2 entries to anybody who does a Cash App, a Venmo, or a PayPal. If, say, you don't want to buy anything from the store, but you want to send $5, $10, $5,000 through any of those links, you can do that too, and I'll give you 2 entries. And so you'll be added to the list of everybody that made orders on Pure Truth Coffee this week. How about that? We'll be doing that live giveaway Monday night, 8 p.m. Monday night, 8 p.m. 8:30 or 9, actually, Monday night. 8:30 or 9. All right. You want to go back to this
work
press
necessary
briefing?
to
Now, before something that's actually in use get tapped in Europe?
The president mentioned today, actually, in response to a question, that we have in fact begun coordinating with allies to